Did you like my friend Frankie?
Not very much.
Didn't he tell you what you wanted?
Where can I find Arlen Page?
You're not going to find Arlen Page. She's a junkie. Didn't he tell you that he sent me that guy?
Jane McKenna sent you that guy.
Well, she's dead.
Welcome to the Cinematic Flashback Podcast. Get ready to hop into the Wayback Machine as we journey through the wild, bold, and unforgettable films of the 1970s. Each episode, we break down a classic movie or forgotten gem by exploring the who's who of each film, diving into the premise and plot, seeing how it performed then and now, and wrapping things up by asking, did it groove through the decades or did it lose its beat? Today, we're reviewing Clute from 1971, directed by Alan J. Pakula and starring Jane Fonda and Donald Sutherland. I'm your host, Chuck Bryan, and joining me is my co-host, Matt Sargent. Matt, how are you doing?
I am well, and happy to be back in the podcast chair.
So, last time we talked about the French Connection.
Well, I don't want to be that kind of person, but we talked about the French Connection too.
Did I say that?
Connection.
Oh,
that's okay. They're both great movies, and we had a great time talking about them. If you haven't listened to that episode, go back and listen to it, because the French Connection 2, it's a cool transition from the French Connection to the French Connection 2. Some of the same characters, but you get to spend a lot of time in Marseille. And if you like to listen to French people talk French, it's a great movie. We enjoyed it.
I just liked that it wasn't a retread beat per beat of the first movie. And so I think that was a great example of how you can make a sequel and not feel like you're just, retreading the same waters.
This was really truly a sequel. It kind of continued the end of the story. It had a nice change in sort of tenor and tone, and the action was still there. There was a lot. It was good, and it was a very good movie in its own right. I think it wouldn't have been as good without seeing the French Connection first, but the French Connection was so popular that that was really not going to be an issue. So I did enjoy that. But we're talking about Clute.
Hey, one of the characteristics of the cinematic flashback was we didn't give spoiler warnings because we weren't going to spoil a film, because ultimately we wanted people to go and see the film if they thought it was a good idea. However, that makes it really, really difficult for us to talk about a film. You know what I mean?
It does kind of put handcuffs on us, and also inadvertently, when you're talking to somebody like me who has a hard time shutting up, I'm going to give a spoiler by mistake. I mean, when I tell people about a recent movie, I have to be very, very careful because I don't want to ruin it for them, And so I agree. We need to find a solution for doing that.
So during the recent holidays, I was listening to other podcasts that are out there that I haven't listened before, and I came across one that was actually reviewing Clute. They spent a portion at the beginning being completely spoiler-free. So whatever they talked about during that segment, there was not going to be a spoiler. And then they would transition into another segment where from here on out, there possibly could be spoilers. And I think that was a really good way to handle it, because if somebody wanted to just get enough information about whether or not they even wanted to see the film, they could pause and then come back later to finish it up.
Doing it that way is we can be very circumspect at the beginning and talk about general strokes and things like that, and things that won't ruin the film. But there's certain times when we get into the details of what's happening in the film that we might not be giving a spoiler, but you might be able to deduce what's going to happen through some of the details we give. And we don't want to feel bad. So at some point, what I'm assuming is you're going to say, from this point forward, there be beasts. Beware.
I think that actually happened on Black Sunday, because it's like, okay,
Whoops.
Robert Shaw is trying to get on the blimp, and well, I guess you can kind of figure out what happens from there, but we're not going to say it. It's like, oh, okay. Apparently he survives.
Yeah,
So.
I think that will be a good way to handle it. I agree.
Hey, I see you got something there in your hand. What are you holding?
We got a review from Louisiana Law Dude. It's the first review we're going to read on air, and we really want to express our appreciation for these reviews. Obviously, we're going to cherry pick the very best of them, and Louisiana Law Dude clearly has a mastery of the English language, and he's able to express his feelings about the podcast so incredibly well. Let me read you his words. Quote, I believe the best podcasts are those where the hosts clearly love the subject of the show, and Cinematic Flashback provides ample proof of that supposition. Chuck and his crew clearly love film and are deeply knowledgeable on the topic, so you know from the start you're in for a fun listening experience. After binging 4 episodes today, I'm hooked.
Awesome feedback, right?
You can just refer to me as the crew. Actually, you've had some guest hosts sitting in my chair a couple of times, which I'm 100% on board with. Really, Chuck is the one that does all the work. He's the one that does all the production. So really, these kudos are really for you, Chuck. I'm just a happy pal that gets to talk about movies with you. So this is really a reflection on you and your work, and we really are very thankful. Before we dive in, though, we're going to take a quick break. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Bree Daniels?
One man is missing. 2 girls lie dead, and somebody is on the other end of the phone. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Who is it?
Bree Daniels. Can I come in?
Come in.
Bree Daniels, girl on the brink. Somewhere among her clientele is a freak who murders call girls.
Sit down.
And a wholly incredible cop who insists her life is worth saving.
I don't think he's going to come back again.
I just don't want to be alone right now.
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
What else do you remember about the man who beat you up?
Nothing. Except that he wasn't kidding, that's all.
But you cannot identify this man as Tom Gruneman.
I can't identify him as anybody.
Give me your hand. There's someone on the roof.
Did you like my friend Frankie?
Not very much. Hey. Your tapes.
Golly gee, just what I've always wanted. Dirty phone calls. Is Mr. Goldfarb there? I've got to talk to somebody. I'm just a little way across town. Can I come over?
Detective Trask, please. Hi, John Klute. He didn't take the plane. He canceled out. Well, I think this man killed Jane McKenna and killed Arlen Page. I think he drowned them. I think you should prepare yourself for the fact that possibly Tom is dead. But the only way I'm going to find out is to find him.
All right, fine. I'll notify the board as soon as I get to Chicago.
Hello?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid.
Welcome back. Clute stars Jane Fonda as Bree Daniels, who is a New York call girl. She is connected to the disappearance of one Tom Gruneman by a series of letters, very risque and disturbing letters, found in his desk. After the case has stalled, the family hires Tom's friend, John Klute, played by Donald Sutherland, to go to New York and investigate the disappearance and to find Grunem.
Clute was directed by Alan J. Pakula and is the first in his Paranoia trilogy, which includes 1974's The Parallax View and 1975 All the President's Men. It was also the start of Pakula's collaboration with cinematographer Gordon Willis. The film was released on June 25, 1971 by Warner Brothers. Clute is available on most major streaming services. On Rotten Tomatoes, it's certified fresh at 94% from 47 reviews, and the audience score is 79% with nearly 5,000 ratings.
I actually think that those ratings are probably right. I could really see maybe how this film would really resound with critics, but maybe not as much with audiences.
Yeah, I think that's a reasonable statement. We talked about this before we started taping, is that the movie's named Clute, but really it should be named Bree Daniels because the entire movie is really about Bree.
Right.
And Jane Fonda turns in an Academy Award-winning performance for portraying Bree. Bree is a very nuanced character. She is playing a New York call girl who has worked at the very, very highest levels and down into more of a casual call girling, right?
Yeah, she has moved out of her Park Avenue apartment because she's not getting as much business anymore. But there's a reason for that.
Sure. I just wanted to talk a little bit about Jane Fonda's trajectory, because one of the interesting things is that Jane Fonda's career really started with more of a cotton candy type of roles. She was in Barbarella, and really she was eye candy in Barbarella.
Oh yeah, I remember that movie.
I've heard her referred to as an interstellar sex kitten, all glamour and zero gravity. But by the 1970s, she was shedding that skin fast. In 1970, she did They Shoot Horses, Don't They?, which showed glimmers of her depth. But it was Clute in 1971 that really marked the shift, earning her first Oscar in 1972. And she was quite young to win an Oscar in this role. And I think it can be argued that it was the role itself and not 100% her acting in the role, although it's hard to separate the two. It was a groundbreaking role, but of course, a lot of the reasons that is that persona as a feminist firebrand really started to launch in this role. A lot of people have a lot to say about her activism or anti-war crusade. Some people hold her in low regard because of some of the things she did. She went on in her career to turn in amazing performances, but she got her Academy Award for this role. By the way, she won the Academy Award for Best Actress playing Bree Daniels the same year Gene Hackman won Best Actor for The French Connection, which, strangely enough, we have reviewed on the Cinematic Flashback Podcast.
I think we talked about Clute because we were talking about Gene Hackman having won the Academy Award. And I think I looked up and saw that Jane Fonda had won the award for Clute. And I thought it was kind of a funny name. I had never heard of the film. And I think at the time you said that you had heard of this.
It's funny. I was absolutely positive I had seen the movie Clute before. And then when I watched it, I was like, I don't think I've ever seen this movie before. I think I totally mistook it for a different movie. So it was cool for me to sort of see this movie that I had never seen before, but I had kind of believed I had. So that was neat. And it may happen to some of our listeners. And if it does happen, we'd love to hear from you in the form of a review. And if you're lucky and the review is as well written as Louisiana Law Dudes, we will read it on air.
Nice. Very nice. For some reason, I'm starting to suspect that maybe the film you're thinking of, because you're kind of thinking of it like some kind of hard-boiled detective. I'm wondering if you're thinking of Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye, which is, believe it or not, that's a Robert Altman film, the guy who directed MASH and McCabe and Mrs. Miller, and is coming up in season 2 for us.
Well, that'll be great, because I think I might have been thinking of that. I certainly was thinking of something more along the lines of like a Maltese Falcon or some other Dashiell Hammett type. That's what was coming to mind when I was going to be a hard-boiled detective. And honestly, in this movie, Clute is a good guy. He's in a situation where he's having to surveil people, which is never a comfortable position to be in. And in this movie, that kind of works through the movie, and it's a part of the trajectory of the movie. when you really get down to it, he's a good guy. He's a very good guy.
I don't know what I was expecting from this movie. I read the description and I was kind of like, do I really want to do this one or not? Because I was actually very surprised for a movie that was probably filmed in 1970, it released in 71, just about how direct it was in talking about sex work. Bree Daniels, she'd go to the John, she'd say, I know you only want to spend $50, so tell me what you want to do. And she goes, oh, that sounds very good. That's a great idea. I like your mind. It's going to cost you $100. You know, and I'm like, wow, Hollywood was definitely loosening up.
Well, I think it's actually larger than that. I think all of American society was loosening up. Remember, we were coming out of the 60s and we were getting into what we would call the more mainstream 70s. But I think that was what I was kind of intimating before when I talked about this Academy Award. And to some extent, to me, she was given the Academy Award because she was portraying a character that had never, ever been seen on screen before, a sex worker. I think that brought a lot of attention. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to short sell Jane Fonda. She could have been anybody and they could have ruined that. She absolutely played it exactly how it needed to be played. So for that reason, great job. But the added fact of a woman talking so openly about sex and sex work, and then there's a whole sort of introspection that happens when she's talking to her therapist, that you get the sort of point of view of this woman in this particular situation and under these circumstances that you would normally get. But it was very shocking for the time. I mean, remember, I was 10 years old. I didn't see this movie. It was no way was I going to see it at 10 years old, right? I do remember my parents and my older brother, possibly my older sister, talking about it. It was probably very remarkable, especially the fact that there wasn't a ton of nudity. There was a very small amount, but she was costumed in such a way to be quite alluring most of the time.
Did Hollywood have some kind of code that they would say, hey, we're not going to do this or do that?
Yeah, they really did. And this was an interesting time. The Hollywood Production Code, or the Hays Code, was what was in effect basically all the way up until the late 1950s. It didn't allow anything from lustful kissing or any kiss that lasted too long or was in an embrace that was too close for too long. And crime couldn't be shown as paying off.
Well, that would have ruled Clute out alone.
Well, certainly the French Connection.
True.
The first French Connection, right? But it started crumbling in the late 1950s with films like Some Like It Hot. But then around 1968, the MPAA switched to a rating system. And with a rating system, they could basically make the argument that, hey, no 5-year-old, 8-year-old, 10-year-old is in this movie theater, so we can talk about adult themes. Think Carnal Knowledge, The Last Tango in Paris. They're all pushing boundaries on desire and power. And Klute was ahead here, one of the first to openly portray sex work without moralizing. Bree's not punished for being a sex worker. She's humanized. This movie plays a lot with the male gaze, or that voyeuristic camera objectifying women, but contrast that with the female perspective. Bree's often shown as diminished or watched and critiquing on how society boxes women in.
So from her perspective, we see what she says, we see how she acts. And then I think in The Psychiatrist, we see how she really, really thinks. I think those are the truths. So you get that. But then this film, it felt like that you're always following her. And in some cases, you're participating in the voyeurism.
Yeah, without a doubt. And there's a couple of particular points in the movie. Bree is in her apartment after she had met with a client, and she's, of course, doing domestic things. But the angle we're seeing is from above, like through a skylight, like we're peeping on her and watching her instead of just filming her moving around the room. There's sort of this watching. And then there's a scene where she's in the garment district with old Mr. Goldfarb. Clute. We're laughing because Archie Bunker's wife, Jean Stapleton, plays the part of Mr. Goldfarb's secretary, and it is hilarious.
It's so funny because the minute she comes on, instantly you know who she is, and you're like, "Oh, so that's what Edith did. That was
This is Edith's
she
job
worked for
in the
Mr.
day.
Goldfarb, and she had to get back home before Archie got home from the bar or the loading docks, wherever he
Wherever
worked."
you were. You know, with Mr. Goldfarb, she has kind of a unique relationship. It's sort of based on sort of a fantasy, playing out a fantasy. She doesn't actually sleep with him at all. She just
Yeah.
talks with him, and it has some alluring things. And he seems to be actually a sweet old dude. But you see that Clute's in there, and he's watching her because he believes she may have some information on what happened to this man that he's trying to locate. So we certainly see some of that creepy being, you know, in cahoots with Clute as he peeps on her, and it's uncomfortable. You want to look away. You're like, hey, dude, nothing's happening here that you need to film or record or listen to.
Let's talk about Donald Sutherland. This is after MASH. This is after Kelly's Heroes. I thought he was going to be somewhere in that area. What we got was a very subdued performance. It threw me off. How about you?
I'm actually shocked that it was after MASH and Kelly's Heroes, because he comes off as being so, I don't want to say unsure of himself, but just so quiet, you know, after playing both of those roles. I think it really shows what a great actor Donald Sutherland was. He is and remains one of my favorite actors of all time. He really had a lot of range, clearly. Honestly, I say this every podcast. If you haven't seen Eye of the Needle, you got to watch that movie. Unfortunately, it came out in the 80s. We're not going to review it here. Maybe some of the listeners will put in comments and request it, and it will be undeniable. Undeniable. Do you get that, fans? Put in your reviews. Put in the request, The Eye of the Needle with Donald Sutherland, and that'd be great. But no, getting back to Clute, it is the name of the movie, but it's funny. He has a very small, I don't want to say diminished role, and it certainly is a role that is the thread throughout the whole film, right? Clute is there from the beginning to the end. Bree Daniels doesn't really appear until several scenes in, but she's then there through the end. So, you know, it makes sense that it's named Clute, but it is not the Clute I was assuming him to be. I think we find in the movie that he's originally a police officer and friend of the man who disappeared. And then he becomes a private investigator. So I think we're led to assume that he got frustrated with nothing happening about finding his friend. And so he quit the police force and got hired by the family to find the guy.
I want to mention something. Gordon Willis, the cinematographer for this film. This is I think maybe this is the first film that he worked with Pakula. You know, he did Parallax View, All the President's Men, and several other films with Pakula. He is known as the King of Shadows. So if you think about every time when Bree is walking up and going into her apartment, there's always all these shadows. Sometimes when she's in focus, her face is hidden in shadows. Enter John Klute. They slightly start to change the lighting, whether it's Klute physically turning on a light or you're starting to see that there's more light in the apartment until the concluding scene of the film. Something that I found very interesting about Klute's character. He represents this outside force that Bree was not expecting and didn't want, but his character brought this light into her world.
Yeah. I 100% agree. Just real quick on that.
Yeah.
The cinematography, it's one of the parts of movies that I definitely do like. I mean, you know, we've talked before that I'm not such a student on the music. I more have reacted to the music, and that's sort of the point of it sometimes, is that it's really exuding a reaction. You know, through doing this podcast and talking with you and being more critical about watching films, and that's why we encourage everyone that's listening to continue listening, because it really opens up this whole new world of appreciation for the movies. And one of them is cinematography. You get to see how they play with the camera, how they're filming, how they're exposing the film to get the feeling that they're trying to get. And it's really amazing. I totally agree with that. But let's talk about some of the other characters and the actors that played them.
So Charles Chaffee played Peter Gable. And believe it or not, this was his first time acting on screen. This was his first big role.
Huh. That's amazing. I thought he had been around forever. I think I've seen him in about a million things.
Afterwards, yes, you've seen him in a million things. But this is his far. Now, Cable is the guy that kind of initiates hiring Clute to go in and investigate after the FBI or the police. The case kind of goes cold for 6 months,
Mhm.
and then he's on it. One actor, when his name came up in the credits, I was like, yes, Roy Scheider plays Frank the Pimp.
Yeah, Frank's a real slick character, a
Oof,
real
I don't
Roy
know.
Scheider did a great job. I mean, he really did a great job playing kind of a swarmy,
You are so
nasty.
right.
What?
You are so right. You are so right on that.
I'll be honest with you, when we saw him in what was the movie we reviewed?
Sorcerer?
The Sorcerer.
Yeah, Sorcerer.
So good in that. So good in The Sorcerer. Again, another movie you got to see if you haven't seen it.
Film, like, I can get behind Cloudy from French Connection.
Yeah.
Chief Brody, of course.
Yeah.
I forget his character's name in Sorcerer, but wow,
Yeah.
what a film.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in this movie, I'm like, ooh, I feel like I got to go take a shower to get the
because in
sleeves off.
in Chief Brody, he's such a clean cut American,
Yeah.
apple pie and church on Sundays dude. This guy is about 180 degrees from that, and it's totally believable. And he's a good looking guy, so there's part of
Oh,
that, and he sort of treats. It's a good counterpoint in this movie because you have Bree Daniels sort of representing this awakening of women and women's liberation and empowerment. And then you have this guy who's 100% throwback. He represents all the bad things.
Great line in this film is when Bree says, "Pimps don't get you the dates. They just take the money." So Alan J. Pakula, we mentioned that he directed The Parallax View and All the President's Men, but he also produced To Kill a Mockingbird and was responsible for getting Harper Lee's blessing for Gregory Peck, whom we last discussed in The Omen with Jeff Panano last October.
Nice. I can't imagine that movie without Gregory Peck.
Yeah, I cannot imagine The Omen without Gregory Peck either.
I can't imagine To Kill a Mockingbird without Gregory Peck.
I was teasing you because I know how much you hated him in The Omen.
Yeah, he was not great.
He was the wrong actor for that role. Gravitas be darned.
But anyway, it's awesome. We have both of these films on our schedule. So Parallax View and All the President's Men, which is great because I know I have seen All the President's Men, but I don't think I've seen the Parallax View. So I look forward to that.
Just to let you know, each one of these films tap into that paranoia feeling that was happening in America, starting with the assassination of JFK and going all the way through Watergate. Oh, the things that you've always imagined were happening. Well, here's an example of where it's actually happened.
And thank God it stopped with that. So, well, we already talked about Gordon Willis a bit, and you title him the Prince of Darkness. So we're talking about what jumped out about his cinematography here. We talked a little bit about the shadows and the framing and the way he isolates characters. I think all of those are part and parcel, and I think we'll probably see more of that in The Parallax View and in All the President's Men.
We need to take another commercial break, but coming after that, we're going to leave the spoiler-free zone, and we're going to talk more about the film, Bree, Clute, all of that. We'll be back in just a moment.
All right.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today to celebrate Death Dave's 1984, a brand new show that will take you through the greatest pop culture year we have ever seen. From movies, music, sports, toys, television, and more, the show will be a chronological journey through every aspect of the year. So who's going to drive you home and not let the glory days pass you by? Death Dave's 1984. It's a hard habit to break, but time after time, I'll show you why 1984 was the best year ever. So who you going to call? Coming in 2026, subscribe and follow now. I'll be back.
And welcome back. So we're now into the spoilery section, if you will, because we're going to now kind of move from talking about characters and we're going to start talking more about the investigation. So the film starts, I don't know if you noticed this, but the film starts with this smash cut, which was very effective. So they're all at like the Thanksgiving table, and so there's Tom Gruneman. The camera's kind of panning down the table, and you see Clute, and then next to them you see Peter Cable, and then it ends up on his wife, and then boom, smash cut, and it's showing Tom Gruneman's chair, and it's at night and it's empty, and you know something has happened. 6 months go by and the case is cold, and the family and Peter Cable have now hired Clute to do the investigation, as we talked about earlier. So let's talk about this investigation a little bit.
Before we start on the actual investigation, we also we want to talk a little bit about why you think, and it kind of begs the question a little bit at the beginning of why he's doing the investigation, which is one of the interesting parts of this movie. In the beginning, you think he's doing the investigation because he's probably the only policeman they know, right? But it turns out later in the story that we find out that he's probably doing the investigation because the actual bad guy wants to have his finger on the pulse of the investigation. But it's interesting that at the beginning, I totally was like, oh, he was a policeman. He gives up being a policeman to being a private investigator. That's actually not a trajectory that we don't see often. But the policemen, if they don't get their detective badge or they're in a small town, they might go to being a PI. And then he's doing this investigation into Tom Gruneman's disappearance. I think there's more to him getting hired than just that. That sort of became clear as we watched the movie.
Here's how I interpret it. Clute and Gruneman were friends.
Yes, they had grown up together, right?
Yeah, and Clute left the force and never done a missing persons before. He has no idea. I think Peter Cable just can't say, don't do that. But, he does have some control because you see that throughout the film, Clute goes back and reports progress to Cable. So I guess they're all friends, right? They know each other.
Well, I think Cable was paying the bills.
Obviously, yeah, the company that Cable and Gruneman worked for were obviously paying for it because at one point, Clute wants to buy an address book with names and all that, and he just needs $500. And so Cable was supposed to go off, get that approved. So yeah, you're right. He was being financed by their
but that
company.
was also part of towards the end when Clute has some ideas and he's laying a trap by reporting to Cable, which was very cool.
He tells him, I know who's done it. Because at this point, he knows it's Cable, right? And he's telling him, hey, look, I think that Tom is dead, but I think I can close this case tonight. I
think I know the guy that beat
Bree up.
And so that's the guy, and it's not Tom. And at that point, Cable's like, ah!
Before the film begins, Cable has had a prostitute in his hotel. He ends up killing her. Tom walks in, doesn't say anything, but Cable knows at some point he's going to use it over me. So he's got to off Tom before it actually happens, which I'll say my biggest complaint about the film was that Pakula didn't do much in terms of trying to hide who the individual was. You kind of figure it out right about at the hour mark. This is a 2-hour film. So right about the 1 hour mark.
Yeah.
You start to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree. I think we talked about this before. It would have been, I think, a superior film to be left in question, to have maybe more alternatives. Frank would have been a good candidate to be the bad guy on this particular case, right? Because he's sort of in the middle of it. And working that to the end would have been a lot more exciting. And I would also say that the final scenes, not the final scene, but the final scene of action where Cable is chasing Bree and with Bree and going to kill Bree, and Clute is working to get there. That was sort of it's a little bit disjointed in my opinion. It should have been sort of almost, you could have had cut screens, where Clute was solving problems and running across the streets and Cable's in the garment building chasing Bree or getting ready to hurt her, and it wasn't. It was like a conversation going on here where you had no sense of time on what Clute was doing. You knew he was working to trying to figure out where Bree was. He needed to know where she was, and he had to go through several wickets to do that. But it wasn't exciting to me.
So here's the funny thing, though, and I kept thinking about you watching this film. If you noticed, at one point, Clute says to Bree, hey, look, I'm really worried about you. I just need, whenever you go out, please be sure to give me your phone number so I know where to contact you at. And then later, Bree is at her psychiatrist's office, who has now left for the day. And so Bree says, I'm going over to Goldfarb's. Here's his number or something like that. Call me over there as soon as the doctor gets in. And it's just like, these 1970s problems of where it's like, if you only had a cell phone.
I'm telling you, it was exactly like that. To arrange to meet up on Friday, you were making plans on Thursday, or the last thing you said to somebody on Thursday, or Friday after school was the plan, right?
Yeah.
Until you actually laid eyes on each other or called their mom's phone from your
Yeah.
mom's phone.
Yeah.
So we were very lucky as growing up. We had a kids only line. My mom and dad bought another phone line because they were sick of answering the phone for all our friends, because I had 5 brothers and sisters, right? So
My
and
word.
4 sisters. So the phone was on all the time. So
My word.
mom and dad bought another phone line, and we would use that. That was kind of the kids line, and it was nice. But that was how you kept in touch with you. Nobody even, I mean, honestly, I remember when some people started to get beepers, because that was the only technology you get to try to, and you'd get a beep in school, and you go to the payphone at school and call another payphone at school. And it wasn't for drug deals. It was actually for communications. Well, there used to be a thing. It's called an answering service. That
Oh, yeah, that's
you had a
right.
number, and you would call that answering service, and you'd say, "Hey, I'm Matt Sargent. If anybody calls for me, tell them I'm at such and such." And everybody had your answering service number, and you would call that answering service. Now, this was for rich people, certainly something in New York, the club owner would own or something like that. But it was a thing that you would call and leave a message with some company. And then when people called in, they'd go, "Oh, I have a message for you, Mr. Sargent."
In the investigation, there was one other thing that I thought was stupid.
Yeah, what's that?
Okay. Klute is talking to Trask, the agent, and he says, "Hey, let's investigate all of his close friends." And then the thing that was linking Tom to Bree were all these, spicy letters that he was sending to her, that he was typing out. And then Trask comes back and he says, "Hey, look, I've compared all of these typed letters. So here's the letter that was sent to Bree, and then here's a letter that Gruneman sent to his wife. You can tell that they're different styles. Oh, and here's another one." And Klute's like, "Oh, that's mine." Well, you said inspect everybody. And then last he pulls up one, and the main characteristic is that the person typing, he switches the T and the H and the word "the." They zoom in on it, and they're like, "This is Peter Cable's example." It seems like that would have been the first thing that Trask would have done 6 months ago to figure out this mystery, and we wouldn't have a movie.
I thought it was actually funny for me because I typed HTE all the time. But now you don't see it because the computer just corrects and goes, "You meant the."
I don't know if you ever remember that movie, The Incredibles, where the villain talks about monologuing.
Yeah.
Okay, so Peter Cable has this massive monologue that he's doing at the
I
end.
think he gets off on it.
Yeah, and then he's playing a tape where he has killed one of the characters from earlier in the film.
Yeah.
And Bree is listening to it. She is just shutting down, and she knows that she's about to be killed, probably much like her friend. And this is where Klute comes in. And Peter looks up, sees Klute, and then he backs out of the window.
Yeah, that was weird.
And that's the end. So the point of the movie Klute is obviously not the investigation. It's really more of Klute being injected into Bree's life and how that totally changed.
So you think
her
it was
trajectory.
metaphorical that he backed out the window, that it was like good triumphed over evil? Or was it this? He actually got thrown out the window, but they didn't show it because they didn't want to show Klute being a brute.
Or maybe where that happened was so bad that this is the only thing that they had.
Yeah,
so
it could be. We never know what. We probably have to get the cinematographer's take on it. It's like, well, it worked out better without us showing Klute trying to push this very large dude through the window. But yeah, no, I agree with that. The other thing, I'll probably take exception to, and people, maybe the listeners will have a problem with this, but the whole ending where Bree's talking about how much she doesn't think she could live with someone who's a good person. This is part of her recordings, is that she doesn't.
Yeah.
She's talking about how she feels about this Klute guy and how she has feelings for him that she's never had before, and how she thinks that's never going to work for her because she's just, her penchant is to just blow that up, to destroy that relationship and not have to get back to her security of being numb. And we see at the end that she's packing up her apartment and leaving, presumably with Klute. He's the one that carries the bag for her and stuff. So it's a little bit of a storybook ending for kind of a messed up person.
The whole story of Bree is that the entire time we see what she's doing and we see what her actions are. But in the psychiatrist's office, we get all of her inner monologues, her thoughts. So in other words, she hates being a prostitute. She hates doing the tricks. She would much rather be an actress, but she's not as good as an actress, but she's an amazing actress when she's a prostitute. So there's this whole, what she wants to do doesn't match with the actions that we see until the very end, right? Then what she's saying to the psychiatrist, she's not sure how this is all going to work out, and that she might even be back by next Monday. And then again, there's a smash cut and the apartment is completely empty. The phone rings one last time because that's the motif of the phone. Johns are calling her house and she says, nope, I'm not going to be here. I'm kind of leaving New York. And then Clute picks up the cat. They walk out the door.
Yeah.
Is it a storybook ending? It was a little bit. Yeah.
Little bit.
But I think it was maybe the beginning of, will she stay in Tuscarora or will she be back?
I mean, I think we can all hope she will. And certainly she seemed directed enough. It would be hard to get away from her past, but one would hope that she could do it.
Well, we'll have to wait for Clute 2.
I thought the ending was interesting. I really liked the overlaying of the psychologists, which I typically don't like. But in this case, it was handled really, really well because they did small vignettes that were salient to the story.
The scenes with the psychiatrist were all filmed last. And what Pakula did in order to get this out of her was she and the actress playing the psychiatrist, they were just ad-libbing a lot until they got the real raw emotion of what she was going for.
What is that called? Method acting?
Oh, she was very much method acting because since the apartment was kind of a character in and of itself, she actually wanted to live in that apartment for 3 days prior to anyone coming in. And so she was the one who kind of set it up. And
yeah, I think that works. It was a cool little apartment, actually.
Yeah.
I thought. I mean, when she was in it, it looked really kind of like, ugh. But when they moved out, I was like, wow, this is a really nice New York City apartment. It'd probably go for $5,000 a month nowadays.
I think the little hovel that Clute was living in down below the bottom of the brownstone, that would go for $5,000.
Crazy.
Matt, the time has come. Did Clute groove for you, or did it lose its beat?
It's funny, since I now discover I had not seen it. It's hard for me because on most of the movies we reviewed, I saw them at least early in my life. I'm pretty sure I never have seen this, or at least haven't seen it in nearly its entirety. But I will say that I did enjoy this movie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I thought it was very interesting. I thought the young Jane Fonda, absolutely stunningly beautiful and well acted. I think we can argue whether it was really an Oscar-worthy performance, but it certainly was in the conversation of Oscar, right? But it was also a groundbreaking role. So the combination of the role and Jane Fonda's ability to play it so incredibly well really is something to see. It's also interesting to see Jane Fonda, who's, now one of our elder statesmen of acting, been in some crazy shows, some wonderful shows like On Golden Pond and, a bunch of other things. And even recently, some really funny situation shows. It's amazing to see her in this because this is really, I would argue this is her first dramatic role, and she does a great job on it. I always loved Donald Sutherland. I think he plays an understated role in this amazingly well. He's sort of doing what he has to do to try to solve this problem, but not really liking it, which is refreshing. He's not getting off on listening to the things. He's very non-judgmental about her sex work and stuff like that. So I think it grooves, and I think it's well worth the watch. I would definitely recommend to people, get a hold of this thing and give yourself a good 2 hours and you'll enjoy it.
For me, the real 2 stars of this film are Jane Fonda and Gordon Willis. Fonda's therapy scenes let us hear Bree's thoughts with the movie without actually spelling everything out for us. And Willis's camera work and lighting work make you feel her tension and her fear. So together they give you everything that you're going to need without a whole lot of extra talk. So Bree is a deeply layered character, and this film sets the tone for what Pakula is going to be doing next. I am excited to see the Parallax View and All the President's Men. For me, Clute is pretty groovy.
I 100% agree with that, and I'm also 100% agree with I'm looking forward to the Parallax View and All the President's Men.
Do you know who is in the Parallax View?
Is it somebody that I should know?
Think McCabe and Mrs. Miller, the star, and not Julie Christie.
Warren Beatty?
Warren Beatty. Yep. Yep. One last thing I wanted to say about Jane Fonda was, I have to admit, before this film, I knew her for Barbarella. I knew her as the lady who had all of the exercise tapes in the 80s that seemed to always be on for sale in between commercials of Star Trek. And then finally, I know her for a film that I've never liked. I've never liked On Golden Pond, but there's a reason for that. On Golden Pond was playing at the same time as one of the Friday the 13th movies, and I tried sneaking into Friday the 13th. And I was caught, and I was escorted to the theater that I had the ticket for, which was On Golden Pond, and there was no getting out of it.
How embarrassing for you.
Yeah.
How old were you? Let me ask you that.
Gosh, I can't. Well, I'll tell you, I wasn't. What's the age for R-rated movies? 18.
17.
So 17, 18. So I was younger than that.
It was NC-17, and there's R, so I guess maybe it's 15. I don't know. That wraps up our show for today. If you have a question or comment about our show, we'd love to hear it. Send us an email through our website, www.cinematicflashback.com. Thanks for listening to the Cinematic Flashback, and join us next time when we dive into another 70s classic. We'll see you then.
We got the who's who line up and the plot breakdown. Then it's how to do in every city and town. And we'll see if it grooved through the decades or did it skip a beat. Come on and flash back to the golden age where the stories were wild, breaking out of the cage. From the highs to the lows, every laugh and scare. It's the cinematic flashback, baby, we'll take you there. You want it?